Good afternoon, everyone. Before I get started, can someone please type in the chat box if you can hear me okay? Okay, great, thank you. This is Megan Gallagher with the Illinois GIS Association, broadcasting from Glen Ellen, Illinois. Welcome to the fourth and final webinar of our Python series. We are looking forward to your comments and questions during the program. When you have a comment or question for our speaker, please enter it into the chat box at any time during the webinar, and the speaker will answer your questions. Without further ado, I would like to introduce today's speaker. Bert McAlpine is a GIS coordinator for Julie Inc. with over 19 years of GIS experience. He is a GISP and an Esri certified ArcGIS desktop professional. He works with different entities around the state using GIS data to help in Julie's processes. Mr. McAlpine uses Python every day in managing base data for all 102 counties, Julie's 2,000 plus member data, as well as various SQL reporting and analysis. Today, Mr. McAlpine will be presenting a webinar entitled ArcPy 2, which is a continuation of the previous session. Please give your warmest virtual welcome to Bert McAlpine.
Thanks, Megan.
Yep.
Thank you, everybody, for attending another webinar hosted by ILGISA that I'm giving. This is the last one of the series, like Megan said. Let's get through a slide deck. There's very few slides this time. That's me, contact information. Nobody's reached out for any help yet, but seriously, I mean, if you need help, Google it, online search it. If you still need help, give a shout. Every time, don't use the text editor. There's some free options there in no particular order. Online resources, and again, the presentation and the code will be sent out. Megan will send that out or put that on the website for y'all to get to. My contact information, we'll show that again at the end. That was all of the slides. So last time we talked about Python and geoprocessing tools pretty much. So this time we're going to talk about Python and mapping. So there's the mapping module, which deals with the MXD. It doesn't deal with pro projects. There's an MP module for that. It is similar, but it is different. So you have to understand that you use the mapping module for dealing with map documents like MXDs, like most of us used to dealing with. And if you're using Pro, you're going to be using MP. There is one thing to note, that if you were in your development IDE and you try to import in ArcPy MP into 10.7, it's going to crater and not know what it is. Same way if you're in the Python version for Pro, if you try to import mapping, it's going to crater and not know what it is. So when you're debugging stuff, just pay attention to which one is going to be your active environment. In this case, I have my IDE set and my solutions, and this is the active environment. It's grayed out, means it's active. So to access MXD, you've got a couple different options, and I'm just going to start the debugger, and we'll step through this code. And also, this window comes up and it tells me I'm for sure in Python 2, which is mapping. Python 3 will be your MP. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to reference MXD on disk. You cannot create a new MXD. You can copy one. You can do some other options with it, but this is the MXD. It's not real helpful in any way, shape, or form. I got 3 different base maps. I got an inset map with the index. Then I had the state of Illinois on there with no definition queries or anything. So we're going to make some changes to this just to show you some basics of mapping, how you can interact with your map if that's something that works in your what you need to do too. So we're going to start stepping over. So that's the path to MXD. I make a reference to my map document to the path. So now I have an MXD object. So this object has a whole bunch of different properties. Active data frame, active view, authors, credits, data-driven pages would be a yes or no. Some of these are writable, some of these are readable, some of them are rewrite. You'll have to look in the help. And there's a fair bit of stuff in here that you can access. So like author, I don't think author is set on this one. I got the wrong window. Debug. Switch this tab. So yeah, author's not set. If we do data exported, I'm pretty sure is read only, but it gives you a Python date time object. Page size, I'm pretty sure is read write, so you can adjust that if you wanted to. In our case, I'm going to do save a copy, and I'm just going to make a copy, and I will prove to you I'm going to make a copy. So I got my folder here with my MXD, and I'm going to continue the code. And you can also tell which is the active view. So page layout, or if you got a data frame at your active view. And now there's Python copy, which we just made. Same size, different date, because it's saved with today's date. So now that we have a map document, we've got information to access to all that information. But most of us really aren't going to be doing a whole lot with the map document other than saving or exporting, possibly changing data for data sources, that kind of stuff. So to get the data frames, this ArcPy mapping.list data frames, and it lists all your data frames. Our map has got 3 data frames. For some reason that didn't refresh. So there's supposed to be 2 more maps on the page. I don't know if it's the webinar software or what, but Esri's not happy. So I'm going to list the data frames. It comes out as a list. So I'm getting the first one in the list because zero-based index, and I also put in a filter. So map document and then wildcard. So in this case, I'm looking for the one that has main. If I wanted to put asterisks in there, that would support 0, 1, or any number of characters. So if you're looking at something that had the word main in it, you could just put asterisks on either side, and you would get that particular data frame returned. So now, if we do df, we have a data frame object. Here, I'm just going to list them all. And now if I do df all, get all the data frames, and there's 3 of them. So now that I have access to the individual data frames, these 3 in here, my df was this one, and it's got a couple. It's got a feature layer, it's got a group layer, it's got another group layer, it's got another group layer, and maybe that's actually a web service, but it's got 2 group layers in it. So we want to access the data inside this data frame, the layers inside this data frame. So the way you do that is you list layers, and you do MXD and data frame. And you can also do a wildcard. So if you're looking for just one, just one particular layer, you could get just that one layer. In this case, we're just going to get them all. Our first layers are what we got in this one. So I made layers, which is a list. I'm getting the first item on the list, calling it layer. If we do layer, it's my shapefile of the states, actually the Esri shapefile of the states. Now that we have a layer, well, I guess now we have, data frames, you got a whole bunch of different options as well too. Same as the map document or the MXD that you can access, read and write. Like, is it time enabled? Is it spatial reference, scale, rotation? So if you wanted to set the display units into meters, you could do that this way. Map units in feet. You could change the name of it, rotation, spatial reference, bunch of different things you could access in there, depending on what you want to do with it. You could change the scale. You can change the extent. So if we hover over extent, this is all the options inside extent. There's a JSON version of it, X, max, min, Y. Lots of different ways to adjust extents. So if you wanted to zoom around the map, you could, or data frame, you could. So now we have our layer is this one layer, and layers has a bunch of properties: brightness, contrast credits, is feature layer, is broken, is base map layer, long names, got a regular name, label classes, minimum scale, maximum scale. So when you zoom in or out, you could have it turn off or turn on, whatever you need it to do, or whatever you want to adjust, you can. So in this case, we're going to say is feature layer, and it doesn't print in here, but if we run it in debug, it says it's true. It is feature layer, because some stuff, like if you're trying to geoprocess it, and you've got a whole bunch of feature layers nested under groups, you can just grab all the layers, and then if it's not a feature layer, just skip it. And also is broken. So you want to make sure that the path of the data is there, not the dreaded red exclamation mark, so it's not false. You can also get the data source, so you can double check to make sure if somebody did update and this data should be pointed somewhere else. You can double check to make sure it's pointed to the right spot. If you want to add a layer to the map, fairly straightforward. You first have to make a mapping layer. And this tool, if you grab the IntelliSense, it just says arguments. So basically you can point this to a feature class on disk, shapefile, feature class, SD, blah, 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 or you can point to a layer file, that LYR file. So that would have your symbology and everything else in it, which is the easiest way to symbolize something, is to have it pre-symbolized in a layer file and just point that data in the map to it. If you get into MP, there's a whole lot of fine-grained control, and we'll get into that here a little bit later. So now I made a layer object, and if I do add layer, it says map layer. Not a whole lot about it other than it's a layer, the same as our other layers here. It's on disk rather than in the map. So now, and here I make a note that if you want it styled, it's easier to do a LYR first. So here we're going to add it to the map. If you're looking at the map, when you add it, it won't do anything because it doesn't automatically refresh the active view. Sometimes it does, sometimes it does not. So normally it's a good idea to do refresh active view. You used to have to do refresh table of contents. I can't remember what version, maybe 10.5. Refresh active view also refreshes the table of contents. So now that's added to our map, and it is I refresh the view, and if I go through here, I'm going to list all my mapping layers in that map. I left the wildcard in as all of them. I could have omitted it. And I specify the single data frame, which we specified up here as the main data frame. And that's actually the name of it. You can name your data frames whatever you want. Mine's called main. And so now, for everything in there, I'm going to see if it's a feature layer, and it is. Now I haven't saved, so I added this to my map, but I haven't saved it yet. It's in there, but it's not saved. So if I bailed out now, it wouldn't have any changes. So in this point, we should print to this window. So I say very informatively that it has 52 features, 52 states, in this case territories as well, obviously. So I'm going to check for a definition query at this point, and I'm going to say, well, what's my DQ? And my DQ, not Dairy Queen, definition query is empty. So with most of these properties that I read write, I can just say layer definition equals my query in this case. So I'm going to assign it a value. And now, if to do DQ2, you can see it went from nothing and now it's been assigned a value. We're going to count them. And I'm going to, now I got one. There's only one state that we live in. Same way for adjusting transparency. So I'm going to adjust transparency to half, 50%, and I'm going to turn the labels on. And now since I have two layers with the same name, it's going to do the same thing again. And now I'm just going to, well, I could show you the date saved. So that was saved a little bit ago. Author is not set. I'm going to change the author to Python script. I'm just going to assign it a value. Date exported. I want to think there's a default for none. So if you get 1899, ArcMap has not exported a map yet. So that's December 30th, 1899 at midnight. I'm not sure why they chose that, but I mean, that's well before most things are relevant. So page size would give you that. I'm going to save a copy now. So I'm not going to save that map. I'm going to save a copy. Or not. It says I can't write to my disk. All right, there's my culprit. I got some backups that run instantaneously. I did not pause them. Got one more. That is one thing I have not mentioned, but it is a good idea if you are writing code and you're worried about something blowing up. It's not a bad idea to have something like that. So that saved the copy and it failed on save. Okay, so what I did was I created this file, the changes one, and then when I tried to save it, it was still backing up. So I'm not going to rerun that code. It doesn't take very long to run it, but we'll open it up and we will see now that it has a transparency of 50 and the labels are on for those two layers in that one data frame. And while that's loading, the next example we're going to look at, oh, there it is, off screen, of course. All right. So I have labels there. I don't know if you can see them or not in the middle of the screen, Illinois and Illinois. So there's two layers on top of each other here. If you look in the table of contents, you can see this layer. This was just default added. I didn't symbolize it. I didn't have a layer file saved or anything. It's whatever color this is. And then it's set to 50% transparency. And the label is set to on in this case. And the same thing, if you wanted to adjust your inset, you could do the same. But that's as quick and simple as dealing with that type of data. If you need to change anything, another option in here is if you're, and I do this a lot, is if you want to interact with every layer in the map. Like I've got stuff that I'll load up a whole bunch of layers. I want to do the same thing to all of them. I can just reference the current map document, which is in the comments, but it's specifically pointed out. If you're inside ArcMap, whether you're in the console or if you're in the toolbox. If you run a tool from here, you can reference the current open map, and it's the map you're in. So it doesn't care if you have 50 different MXDs open, whichever one you run the tool in, it's going to know that's the active map. And to reference that, you can just use current rather than an MXD path. Stop doing that. So now I want to export this out. I know lots of different folks that I've worked with in the past. If you're doing report maps, you know, they need them in JPEG, they need them in PDF, they need them in PNG, they need them in a whole bunch of different things. So this is just, I made a function on this one. I got a try block, and this function, so if you took arguments, it would pass them in. In this case, there are no arguments. This is just all hard-coded in. In this case, I got MXD. I'm going to set that to start with debugging. So let me crash that one first. Start with debugging. So now we got our MXD, which is just the path of disk. This is the one we just made. And now I'm going to get the output path, which in this case is the folder, actually the file path without extension. So I want all my files to be named the MXD name in the same spot. To export a PDF, pretty simple to do. MXD, output, image quality. There are a number of other options you can do: data frame, page layout, export height, width, resolution, color space if you want grayscale, compression, vectors, image compression, basically everything you've got the option to do when you export it out manually. I'm going to do the same thing now with the JPEG. Again, we're in debugging, so it's running a little bit slower than what it would normally run. If we look in here, we got a couple maps now. Let me run this one more time. So that's done. So I'm just going to tell it to continue. My code tells me that it made those. I'm just going to exit out of debugger. And now I made Python changes, and I made Python changes PDF and the JPEG. And there's my map. Double labels, transparency, even though it looks terrible. Extent of this data frame, that was just set up beforehand. It's tapered like that because of the projection differences. This was in WGS84, I believe. And maybe that's in WGS84, it's just the scale. But that's the distortion from latitude, longitude, making things look like a rhombus there. So now, if I wanted to make this into a tool, let's say, you know, every day I got hundreds of folks working on MXDs, and I'm a big map production, say, you know, one of the big map, you know, if I make flat books or whatever I'm doing, if I want to turn this into a function, that's a GP tool that I can use, I'm going to come over here and again, so if it takes arguments, I'm going to expand the arguments to whatever's passed into it. So I made a function. It takes two arguments, MXDs and output folder. And so in this case, MXDs is going to be a list. And nothing's hard coded in here, so this won't run. We're going to go over it and I'll show you how to make the script tool inside of map. So we got two parameters, MXDs first, output folder second. MXDs is going to be a multi-value, and it's going to pass a long string in, and they're going to be separated by semicolons. That's just something Esri does for multi-value inputs. And then I'm going to pass a little message in that says I added the maps, which will be a list. It will not print real pretty. And then for every M, in this case, maps, now this letter doesn't care what it is. I mean, you could put map in there if you'd prefer. For M in maps, Here, let me actually I thought there was a way. I don't see my refactoring tool right now. There's a way in the debugger, or sorry, in the map to reassign all those at one time. I don't see it. I don't know why it's not coming up. I did take a major update yesterday, but it's not happy. Oh, there it is. Control rename. Rename. So let's change that with map. So now this debugger. Most of them have a similar function. So it's not like just rename. I'm going to rename it everywhere it happens. So another good reason to use a debugger is here's all the places it's going to change. If I didn't want one of them changed, I could uncheck it. So now if I apply this, all those M's turn into maps. Makes it a little bit easier for you. I didn't even think about it. So in this case, it's actually a list of strings. So you're going to have quotes inside double quotes. So I'm removing the quotes, and then I'm referencing the map document. And then I'm getting the path where, so I'm getting the file path of where I want my outputs to go. Output. Output file. And then, oh, let's see. Oh, sorry about that. So in this one, I'm getting the file path, and I'm splitting it. So I'm just getting the name of the MXD, because there's not an MXD property that says name of MXD, unfortunately. So I'm using OS path base name, and OS path split to manipulate that to get just the name. So whatever MXD I put in, it's gonna, so it'd be MXD_1. That's what this value would be. And now I'm going to take my output folder, which is a variable. So I'm going to put all these out to one spot in this case. So I'm going to just join those together. And remember, OS path.join, I just throw in the file parts I want to join together. So this is the folder, and this is the name. And I don't have to worry about my forward slashes, backslashes, or operating systems or anything else. It takes care of all that for me. Python does. And then I'm going to export MXD to output to image quality to better. I'm going to set my resolution and my JPEG quality. I'm going to set it to 80. I'm going to then delete the MXD. I don't have to, because every time this runs, it will just reassign it. But so that's what this does. It goes through any MXD you give it, makes a PDF, makes a JPEG. So now let's see how to make that into a usable tool. So I'm going to close MXD1. So this is our, in this case, I'm just going to pause the map. So I made a toolbox. The script tool is already in there, but I'm going to show you how to make a new one. So now that I have my script, I'm going to go to right click on the toolbox, add script tool. New tool. New tool. There's some restrictions on underscores and spaces and everything else. You will, if you put something in wrong, it'll let you know as far as naming it goes. Let's see. And that was the multiple one. So I'm just pointing to my script on disk. And now MXDs, that was my first value, and then output folder. So those are in order of my function, MXDs and output folder. So now that I've assigned a name, I got to figure out what I want. And I thought it was map. All right. Let's finish that for a second. What did I call that? Parameters. Oh, arc map. Sorry. So properties, parameters, Arc. So you can only sort these by the first letter, and then you have to tab down through them. Arc map, out folder. In this case, I need it to actually be a folder. So I'm going to search for folder. Okay, but we want to do multiple MXDs. So by default, all this stuff is set. So it's required. So this is the output folder. It's required. It's input of the tool. Multi-value, no. I'm not doing any sort of filtering. Now that I'm up at this one, it's required. It's an input going into the tool. I'm going to say multi-value of yes. If I wanted to, I could put a default environment, default value. Doesn't make much sense for MXDs, but it does if you're doing feature classes and doing testing. You could also, if it's a feature class, you could filter it by type. If it was fields, you could obtain those field lists from another input. So if I want to list all the fields in detailed state, I could do that in here and say obtained from detailed state, and then it would, when I got to that, it'd give me a drop down list of the fields. So it would update as the code worked. So now we'll do that. And now we open our tool up, off screen, of course. So here's our MXDs. Let's see. I don't know where that's at the moment. So I'm going to grab all three of those, as exciting as they are. I'm going to go outputs. So just select my top level folder. I could make a new folder in that dialog window if I wanted to. If anything is wrong in here, it's going to give you some validation. Like I think if I put an S right there, I say, hey, my output folder, it does not exist or is not supported. Obviously it doesn't exist because I threw an S on there. And now when I get out of that window, it's going to validate correctly. It's running. Here's how it was called. Here's the list of map documents. It's telling me that it did Python changes. Now it did Python copy, and then it should be doing MXD_1. But that's basically how you make that is how you make a script tool from a regular piece of code. Now, parameters are completely optional. You do not have to have parameters. So that our first example here, if we wanted to, where's that one at? That one. Since it doesn't have any parameters, we could just point that right to the script and have no parameters and just run it, and it would run fine. Everything's hard coded in here, and there's nothing wrong with doing it that way. If you want to have something that's easy to get to, and you don't want to have to go to the toolbox, you don't want to have to. If you don't want to have to go in and enter in a whole bunch of values, you can hard code them all in. There's nothing wrong with that at all. You just need to do whatever's going to be best for you. I'm going to save that because I made the changes from M to map. And all right, so data sources. This example I've used before. I don't have a. Let's see what this says. Uh-oh, there's updates. I'm not gonna do an update right now for sure. So this is again mapping. And I do specify up here, this is when I made it, so it's been a while. So I made it in September 2011. So the reason I made this tool, I made it for a friend of mine, is his boss every year would take the currents project folder and rename it to, next year he'd rename current projects to 2019. And that breaks all the MXDs. So he was able to just say, here's the root directory that I want to search, that entire folder we just renamed. And I want to look for the bad path, so what it used to be, and then good path, what it should be. Somebody asked, do you know a way to export to a PDF? We just did that. We did PDF and JPEG. So I'm not sure what that question is about. So we did our outputs. There's a JPEG and PDF of every MXD that we put into that tool. And you're going to get the code. You're not going to get this. I mean, you can make it yourself at that point. I'm not gonna clog up the internet with all that extra garbage. So that's backed. Oh, I can't delete that one. Try again. All right, so that's back the way it should be. So on this one here, I got, so if I were to make this a script tool, I've got root directory, which I'm using a walk. So I'm going to walk down that directory. I'm going to search that entire directory. Bad path, good path. And again, everything's wrapped in a try except. I get accept ArcPy errors and I get accept Python errors, so I can tell what's going on. And I don't have a working example of this. The code does work. It only updates stuff if there's a bad path. So when we looked at is broken for layer properties, that's what we're looking for. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use OS walk, very similar to ArcPy DA walk, which I could probably use, but I made this before they had ArcPy walk. So I'm going to get the root, the directory, and the files, and then for every name and files, I'm going to get the full path. And if the full path ends with .mxd, I'm going to stick it in a list. I made my list before I started my loop, so that's going to give me a list of all the MXDs, and that's what this file list is. So I'll populate this list, and now in this list, I'm going to go through each MXD that I've already found. I'm going to say MXD equals the file, and I'm going to say, okay, list broken data sources for that MXD. And if it's greater than 0, that's what that is. So the lens, I'm getting the link to this list of broken data sources in this MXD. If it's greater than 0, I'm going to do MXD find and replace workspace paths. You could do the same thing if you had a file database and you went to SDE and you need to fix your paths. This tool will do that. The true, I believe, is validate. Sorry. So you're going to validate, and it's only going to replace it if it validates correctly. So it's going to check to make sure that data is actually where you're saying it's at. So then it's going to say it's been repaired. I'm fairly paranoid. So at this point, I'm going to save a copy as _repaired. That way I don't damage the original document. Then I would get messages just to see if anything had gone on in here that I needed to know about. And that's a pretty straightforward example. There's not very many comments in there. I guess I should have added some, but get the list of MXDs. For each MXD, check for broken data sources. If there's a broken data source, do find and replace. This also does partial. So if you just switch from C: to D:, like you moved hard drives, you could search just that part of the name and change it. And I do recommend doing validate true. It takes a little bit longer, but it does make sure that you're not inserting another bad path. All right. So that was mapping. So ArcPy mapping. We're going to look at some similar stuff into Pro, which is MP. So you'll notice I'm going to change my environment. I'm going to activate this Python Pro environment because if I try to import MP in our mapping into Python Pro, it doesn't know what MP is. That module's not in the Pro. Just like mapping, just like MP module is not in desktop. So that if you get some weird error, and I think I can probably just produce that import. Well, let's see, ArcPy mapping. Stop that. Oh, that's exactly what you're going to get. It says module ArcPy has no attribute of mapping. So if you see that, or if you go into, so this is 10.7, so this is Python 2. If you do arcpy.mp, you will get the same exact error. That says MP rather than mapping. So if you see that, you're trying to access one module from the other. I know why they do it, so you don't get confused. But for me, it sure would be nice if I could deal with MXDs inside of Pro, but they won't let me. I've asked. So the MP module, again, just for Pro, has got some real cool benefits. So one of them is you get fine grain control via the SIM. So in SIM, because everybody knows what that is, obviously, is cartographic information model. Here's a link, off screen, of course. So this gives you some information about the SIM, but basically, like here's a version of the SIM. Gives you the version, the pass, a whole bunch of different stuff about it. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff in here. There is a tool to modify the SIM. Let's see, modifying field properties. So, and it says do not modify the SIM directly. So there's a tool called layer.getDefinition. In this case, they're called version 2. And then from the SIM layer, feature table layer, field descriptions, you can change, like field visibility, you can change all kinds of things. And you can change all the different symbologies. I mean, it gets into the nitty gritty. You've got full access that ArcObjects and VB would have. So if you need to do something that you can't do with the regular tools, you can get in there and mess with it. But it's easy to break stuff too. So if you can, try not to use it, but it is there if you do need to use it. So we're going to step into this one. Let's see. So here's my Pro project. So my Pro project, I just imported in this MXD. So we'll open that up. Let's open and we'll start this code. So we'll start with debugging. You can see that it started in Python 3, which is my Pro Python. It's open. You can see it is the same fantastic, highly detailed, award-winning map of our state. So we're going to reference it the same as we did before. We're going to get a Pro path. It's just going to be the string of that. So and I referenced it. So again, my map document, it's got a whole bunch of properties. Date saved, default geodatabase. So a lot of these you can change. Like if you don't want the default geodatabase, you could move it to a different one, right? Just through this file version. So this is 2.40 rather than 2.4.1. File path, full file, home folders. You can adjust all that stuff. And then let's see. Keep stepping through this. So it gives you access. This doesn't print. I should have thrown those in print statements, but like the home folder. And this is read write. So we could change that to something different. I'm not going to, but you could. You can do that all programmatically. So I'm going to save a copy on the line that's highlighted. Just save a copy. And now I got a copy. And my variable APRX is still pointed to my other one, so we're going to point to this copy. Again, I don't like messing with the original, so I'll make copies of stuff. You can always rename those later if everything worked fine. You can just OS delete that one and OS rename this one just straight through Python and make sure it works. So I'm going to do this similar thing. I'm assuming most folks are going to be familiar with Pro even if they don't use it. So we have maps. So I've got 3 maps in set 1, in set 2, and set main, rather than data frames. And then I have layout, and I can have multiple layouts, not like Arc Desktop where you only have one layout. So there's some differences to dealing with them. So, and again, this is just imported in the MXD. Nothing else has changed. So I kept the layout it had. I kept the maps it had. Kept all 3 maps in set 1, in set 2, and set main. And so now I'm going to list the maps. Again, I can do a wildcard filter. In this case, I put in the actual name, so I know I get the right one. And actually, I didn't want, yeah, well, that's fine. So that's a list. So if I do that, even though I got one, it's still a list. So now, if I get the first item out of that list, it's actually going to give me a map. So MPS is just a list, and there's length of 1. Maps, if I run that, is going to be a map. So it's going to give me the information that's available with a map object, type, units, reference scale, camera, default view. And now that I have a map, I can do stuff with that map. And since layouts are not part of a data frame, I also can just list my layouts. So in this case, I got layouts, which is a list of one item because there's only one layout. You can also list reports. There are no reports in this one, but ArcPro does have some pretty cool options for reporting. Let's see. And put a link into the mapping layer or the mapping object. So there's a whole bunch of different items in here. So some of these are properties. So you can, and it says read only, read write, read only, read write, tells you what they are, is broken, is feature layer, whole bunch of different options you can deal with. Transparency, visibility, turn on or off. Now there are methods, so you can do something with them. So get definition, sim version, get selection set, get label class, list layers, whole bunch of different things you can do. So in here, so I'm going to take my main map and I'm going to list the layers in that map. So at this point, I'm getting all the layers in that map, and I'm going to do the very similar thing. I'm going to say, is it a feature? Is it broken? And give me the data source. So broken is false. When I hold my cursor over that, it shows you the value in this IDE. And layer underscore data source gives me the data source. Is broken is false, so this is not going to execute. This code doesn't actually work, this little portion of it, because it's just from the help. So current connection info, new connection info, auto update joins and relates, validate, and ignore case. So this is basically the same thing as find and replace in mapping. It's just different for Pro. And there's in the help document there, there's full-fledged information on how to do that and several different examples. You can also use a connection properties dictionary, which is really cool, because if you need to update the data source for a join, you can use the connection properties dictionary and update just a join file. So like if you have relates or joins and you need to update those data sources, you can do that. And it is pretty cool. Yeah, and there's a whole bunch of examples. We're not going to get deep into that because that's something you can look at, and some of you may never use it, some of you may use it all the time. So now at that point, that's going to not execute because we're at a false condition. And That was my only layer. I came up with one layer in there. And now I'm going to add a layer to the map, same as we did before. So at this point, I'm just saying add layer, and this is on disk. So this one's a little bit different because you can add a layer, or you can add data from a data path. In this case, should be adding data from path. If you had a layer file, RY, or layer X, which is the MP or the pro version of layer file, you could add it using add layer. In this case, we're just going to add it to the data, this map, the main map, not data frame, sorry. No data frames are pro, map. And then I'm going to add it from path. And then I'm going to do a little checking. And I'm going to get my feature counts. And now I'm going to set a definition query, which is done a little bit differently. So in this case, I'm going to make sure it supports a definition query, and then I'm going to assign it a definition query, and then get to count, and then set the transparent to 50, and then go to true, and then save a copy, and then I'm going to, at this point, we'll just go down to here. We'll continue. So I did all that, saved a copy. Now I'm going to point it to my new copy. And so now I'm going to export this map out, which again is done a little bit differently. So I can have multiple layouts in Pro. So I'm going to list layouts. In this case, I only have one. So I'm going to list my layouts, which returns a list, and get my first list. And if I wanted to, it'd tell me the name, the height, the units, the page width, all that good stuff is there, available if you needed it. And then I'm going to do layout, export to JPEG, very similar type input as desktop, but a little bit different. And then I'm going to export it as a PDF. And there they are. So let's see, that code is done. I mean, these are real basic examples, but you can, that's how you can interact with a pro project or a MXD. Let's see, I was going to clean that up a little bit. So that's all the stuff you need. All right. So now we had some folks who ask, let's see, well, there's two of them here. So somebody was asking how to overwrite a whole service. So there's an option to overwrite this entire service, which is different than making a new service, because that's this one right here. So this new type is Azure Service Definition Replacement. So if it's on your server, if it's on RGS Online, if you make a new service, you're going to get a new item number, and all your links and everything else are going to be broken. So somebody asked, I Googled it, took 10 minutes, and said, oh, here's upload service definitions. And then towards the bottom is the code. And then there's the option to overwrite service examples. This is like the third example. So I'm not going to go over this, but most of the code that Esri provides, if you're having issues with it, Esri support will help you sort out what the deal is, especially if you're using one of their examples. So that's where I'm going to leave that one at. Somebody else had another option or another request where they were getting data for mosquito testing, and they were getting a, let's see, what were they getting? I can't share the data, but I could share the I can show you what it looks like a little bit. So there's one Excel table they're getting. And out of this one, they're only using the ones that are in green. So like 5 fields out of this. And then they're doing some manipulation with it, making some extra fields. And they're relating this to feature classes. So, and they were doing all this manually. And I said, there's a better way. I know this is called ArcPy, this session, but we're going to get into pandas. I know we got about 5 minutes left here. I will probably run long again today, not too long, but just to get through this. So pandas is a very good tool. It ships with both pro and desktop and server. So it's nothing extra. You've got access to it. So I made a little function for her called the function work because I didn't know what else to call it. I could have named it, whatever, West Nile processing. In this case, I hard loaded some examples. I'm going to comment those out. So again, if my tool takes arguments, if I call this as a script tool, it's going to get all those arguments, unpack them, and pass them in. I will fix that before I send it out. I saw a typo. So her workflow, well, she's got these 4 tables on disk she was trying to update. So she was selecting and deleting them all manually. Don't do that. So there's the tools called truncate. There's truncate table, and I think there's truncate features. And these don't work for shapefiles, but for geodatabases, whether it be file geodatabases or SDEs, you can use truncate table, which is a tool, and it gets rid of everything. It does it very quickly, much faster than trying to select and delete or going through everything else. So the first step we did was we truncated all 4 tables. Let's see, and then I'm going to use, so I'm not sure why this is, but everybody imports pandas as PD. I'm not sure why, but they do. So anytime you see PD, it's referencing the pandas module in my code. So in here, I'm going to load the Excel file. I'm going to say pd.read Excel file. Grab the Excel file. I say which sheet I want. And then, actually, let me uncomment that, and we'll just see what we get. Uncomment. And if we come into here, start with debugging. It doesn't matter. ArcPy Pro or desktop, it's going to run the same. Again, you're looking at 15 seconds or so to import that ArcPy module just because it takes for frickin' ever. So now I've loaded in Excel into pandas. And pandas have got a whole bunch of, if you're doing statistics or even just want to organize data, it's a pretty good way, really good program to use it, or doing SQL queries. I do most of mine doing panda.read SQL. I can pass in a SQL query and get data straight out of my enterprise databases. So at this point, I didn't put any parameters on there, and I got all the columns. But I know that we only need those 5 columns, so I specified those by the column name in Excel. Or sorry, by the column letter in Excel. So now, if I do that, so I'll get rid of a whole bunch of data I didn't need. And I don't think it gives me the size on disk or not. Size. So that's 300 or 3,995 bytes. I do believe. It is tiny, 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 tiny. And the Excel file is much bigger than that. And so now I'm going to rename some columns because the outputs need to be changed. So I changed the case and rename some, and I said in place is true. In this case, I want to filter my data by results of being positive or negative, because there's some other results in there that the person didn't want, so I'm filtering my results. And now I'm going to make sure everything is title case. So, and then I've also got a dictionary. So remember, dictionary is key, and then followed by the value, separated by a colon in the curly brackets. So on this dictionary, I'm going to go through and replace all these names that need to be adjusted. So in this organization field, there's some values that need to be replaced. And this wouldn't care if it was 100,000 records. It'd be just as fast. Pandas is really fast. I use Pandas dealing with sometimes assessors data. So a lot of assessor systems will dump out all the parcel data for all the years. So you can just filter the data by 2017 or 2018 and make your life so much easier. And it's really, really handy way to deal with it. So in this one, I'm going to make a new column. I'm going to call it date 1, because anybody who deals with ArcGIS Online knows that it doesn't handle dates very well. So they were adding one date or one day to get to display the correct date and on AGO Online. So I added a field, populated that value for 800 records that fast. And now they want to get just the positives. And then in this case, I'm getting just those fields because there's a subset of fields they wanted. I'm going to convert that data frame, so that all that data that we just got into values into a list. All this is Python, all this is Panda stuff here. And now, rather than going to an Excel table like they were doing, which I encourage them not to do. So my variables are down here. I've got these, so these are pointed to the ones that we truncated. And these are just tables, not feature classes. So now at this point, I'm going to say I want to open up an insert cursor. So I'm going to insert data in. And the first step we did was truncate them, so we know they're empty. So for the positive result table, I'm going to insert, I want to get columns organization, collection date, pool size, locate ID, results, and collection 1. And if we open our West Nile one up, I'm going to close that one. Nope. So what this is going to do is, since I converted that to list, so this is my values to a list. It's going to be a list of lists. So the first item in there is health department, which is going to match organization. These have to be in the right order. Collection date, timestamp, which is fine. Pool size, 50. Locate ID, 309. Results, positive. Collection date 1, which is timestamp +1. If we move this over here, and we look at results positive, oh, I was going to show that too. So she was also having issues with not being able to read XLS files. In 10.7.1, mine reads XLS files, not XLS files fine. So in this case, we're going to look at this table, and it is empty because we truncated it. And now we'll go back to our code, and I'm just going to tell it to run. So if I wanted to, I'd go through every row by hand. I'm just going to run it. So that's how fast it took to insert all that stuff. If we go in here and do reload cache, apparently not. Open. Okay, there we go. So I added 43 records because that was only positive ones. And there's some other subsets of tables. So this is all locations. And we're grabbing the geometries out of here. This is a very specific example, but as far as dealing with stuff, here's another one doing the same thing. I'm doing values to list. I need a subset of values. On this one here, I'm saying give me the organization where it's DP Health Department, and that's just the records I'm getting, so I'm filtering in that way. And then do another insert cursor. Very similar stuff going on. And I'm also doing, at this point, I'm getting counts. So I'm doing group by, which is very similar to a pivot table. So I'm getting some results. I got to do some manipulation of the data. We're not going to get into that. Let's run all those now. I'm just going to run it to the end. Run that. Run that. All right, so that ran. So I updated 4 tables, did a few other things. So if we open these up, so there's 500 records in here. So the results, HD is the health department, 289. Results, the rest is using the rest of them, 509. The total counts, I did some summation. So I got a total count, I got positive, negative counts, I got the positive pool, I got the percent positive pool as a text. There was some issue that when it was stored as a number, it wouldn't just, the labels would not display it correctly. So that's also converted to a string. All that's in that little bitty snippet. You'll get the code, not the data, and it's but it's really, really, really good for dealing with all kinds of data. I do it with SQL clauses, SQL queries, that kind of stuff, and it makes it really easy. I can pull a SQL query, write it straight out to an Excel file, and there's the report I need. I can also schedule those to email them to whoever wants to do them. And I have some stuff that runs like every month and at the first day of every year. All that stuff scheduled. I don't have to do it by hand. It's just done for me. All right. For a few minutes past, I'm going to show you one of the things that saves me an enormous amount of time. It is a geoprocessing tool that has no inputs. We'll open that up. So in desktop, you can do Python add-ins. And I've got these 5 little tools up here that I made. So this one here takes data and converts it to geographic coordinate system that I need it in for work at Julie. This one here takes everything in the table of contents and merges together. Doesn't care if it's points, lines, or polygons. It merges them together. I do that if it's mixed types. I buffer the points and or lines by 1 foot. That doesn't affect what we do. KMZs takes a folder of KMZs, and I don't care if it's 1 or 40,000. Processes them and converts them all. Name, this is how I process our streets, our parcels, and our address. Remove layers is just a super simple tool to remove all the layers in a map. So like in this one here, if I add that in, if I add it in 100,000 times, it just removes them all. So all these other tools add to the output. So sometimes I get 100 different table of contents in here for 1 member update. But this one here, I use all the time, and we will look at that. It also has a, we can look at the tool, and then we can look at the toolbox. All right. So here's project to shape. So this is dealing with the map and then the layers in the map. So he's trying to call me. So this was written and it only works at this point in map. But it is this tool, project GCS. So like I said, this tool has no parameters, which is fine to have. I did add a little help and documentation in here so I know what's going on. Or if I get hit by a bus, my predecessor knows what's going on. So this code here, again, it was written a while ago. So I'm using Python add-ins only available in map, not in pro. Importing Tinker, which is a program to make real basic GUIs, graphic user interface. And I use it for copying data to the clipboard. Makes my life easier. There's Python 2 and Python 3. It's uppercase versus lowercase. Setting some outputs, or sorry, not some outputs, environments. So I don't want Z values, I don't want M values for the stuff we do. I don't need routing, I don't need depth. So this function takes no parameters. So when I run this, it looks at my current map, and it gives me all the layers in the current map. I tried to get it to work in Pro as well, and this does. It just doesn't work quite as nicely as it does in desktop for some reason. And then I'm going to make a empty list of all messages. I'm going to check to see if every layer that we got in our map is a feature layer, because when I make when Esri makes KMLs, it automatically puts in a group layer. Or if I have a base map layer in there, I don't want to deal with it. So if it is a layer, I get the workspace path and I split it. So what that gives me every folder in the workspace path. And in this case, this is something kind of silly. So all of our file structures here, let's just grab anybody's. Like this is data from yesterday. So there's going to be a date, a year, and then a member code. All of our member codes are going to be 0A or something similar to that. So I took all the different parts and then I start working through them backwards. So I get my list of all the parts. I flip that list, and then I just assign a name for I get the layer's name, but I take every part that I just reversed and I start checking. And in the first one that that ends with this criteria, basically the last two of the folder name is in that criteria. That's all of our different variations. It grabs that. And then also do some handling if it's MDB or GDB. But what this does is it makes a feature class underscored with the member code that we got from our file parts underscore GCS in the correct folder. But I'm also set my coordinate system that I wanted up here. So now when I'm kicking it out at this stage, I reproject it to when I convert it. And then I always run repair geometry just in case there's something funky in there. And then I add a couple messages. And then this is for just desktop. If you're doing Python add-ins, it does some stuff. So here I open up Tinker. I say withdraw, so that makes it invisible. And then I open the clipboard up and I clear it. And then I append my workspace. And then I destroy my Tinker object. And then I've got a few different other options a few different other programs it opens. So if we look at this, let's see here. So if I come in here and let me save this first. And I'm gonna go. All right, so I'm not sure if everybody is aware or not, but if you select all those files that have the same name, you can rename them all at once in Windows. So I just selected them all, right click, rename, did that. So let's see how this tool works. So it's running. I'll give myself a little feedback. It says ATGO0A has been created. Sure enough, it made the file. If I check the projection, I know exactly which projection is in because I specified it as my output projection. And it's right here. It's not anywhere else. Let's see. And it grabbed the file name from this folder path. And now I opened up my 3 other programs. And the nice thing about this is I'm going to do it on screen. I'm going to just do Control V. So I'll right click and paste. Now I've got the path to that file. And that's what the Tinker code does out here. Those 4 lines of code. I open a Tinker object where you can't see it. I clear my clipboard. And then I do append workspace, which at this point is just a string of the path. Then do destroy. And that saves me so much clicking, it's kind of hard to believe. That is all I've got for you. Like I said, anytime you got questions, feel free to reach out. Any questions, fire away. I'll stay around a little bit if I need to, or we will talk to you later.
All righty, well, that brings us to the end of this webinar and the end of this 4-part webinar series. As always, I would like to thank Bert for volunteering to share his time and expertise with us over the past month. In the coming days, I will be emailing all participants with a recording of this webinar, as well as the slide deck and the code used during the presentation. To review any previous webinar recordings, please visit the past events page on the ILGISA website. Thank you for attending, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, unless we have some questions, but I don't think I see any. No. Bert, did you get any?
I did not.
All righty. Well, everyone have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Bye-bye.